Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, good morning, good morning. You'll forgive me, I am perhaps a bit nasal this morning. I'm still under the weather indeed, but morning, welcome to it. This is another episode of Vuka Nazo here on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. My name is Sihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. This is the Tuesday edition of the show. Now, remember, if you want to get in touch with us here at the show, find us please on our website at www.bigdaddyliberty.com. And of course, all of our social media details are in the descriptor of this video. Now, with that jibber jabber out the way, how about we get straight into the news? All right, we begin here this morning in a slow clap moment for the asinine lockdown politicians, including the likes of Nkosazana, Buffalo Bill, Dlamini, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the other douchey politicians who embarked on that useless lockdown. Well, the lockdown turns out wasn't as useless as I'd argued it would be, insofar as where it was useful is in all the wrong things. Now, what am I talking about? Data has just come out from BATSA, that's the British American Tobacco of South Africa, which pointed out that the one effect of lockdown, indeed the banning of cigarettes, you'll remember that asinine decision that was taken by the politicians, well, it's had a negative externality, as we call it in economics, or really a negative effect, if I can use simple language, by way of nearly 70% of all cigarettes being consumed in South Africa now being effectively illicit brands that are illegal given the legislation around cigarettes, but insofar as them being illegal are not contributing to taxes and the tax base. Now you have a situation where, as we all know, those very cigarettes are one of the most effective means by which the criminal underworld funds its activity. So nearly 70% of all consumed cigarettes in this country are, you can argue, funding the criminal underworld. Well done, South African politicians. Now, if I read from this piece, which cited the study by BATSA, BATSA itself came out and said this. British American Tobacco SA General Manager, that's A1 Johnny Moloto, says that this makes South Africa the largest illicit tobacco market in the world. Between the financial year 2021-2022 to the year before the sales ban of 2019-20, tobacco tax revenue dropped from 5 billion rand by 5 billion rand from 14 billion rand, which is what the state was getting, to 9 billion rand, end of quote. Now, it beggars belief that politicians can now sit back and even try and pat themselves on the back when every single decision they took insofar as trying to respond to the spicy cough was a bad decision, the outcomes of which never matched the intentions. That is, slowing the spread. You'll remember all that bullcrap that they said. None of that actually happened, and instead, what they've done is not only bolster the criminal underworld, as is the case with this story, but actually made things worse economically, socially, and the like in this country, with this country arguably not in a position to even recover from the political decisions taken by lockdown. It was not COVID that destroyed South Africa, but lockdown. It was the decisions by politicians which we're still bearing the cost of today. This being another example in a long list of bad decisions made by stupid, incompetent, and bad politicians. All right, I take you to Gauteng now, where after having warned that it would do exactly that is, namely invade land, occupy it, and dish it out or redistribute it to its supporters, the EFF have followed through on that threat and done exactly that in, of course, the community of Oliphant Hotspos. I hope I pronounced that correctly, which is, of course, as I said, in Gauteng. Let me read a very quick piece on this that was in The Citizen, which basically citing a one Alpha Hadebe, a EFF local ward chairperson, who had actually said this. that where there is vacant land, he said, we will take it. That is the message, of course, from that local ward chairperson, Alpha Hadebe, who led around 1,000 people on a per-urban land invasion in Olifian Houtbosch, that's north of Sandton, last week on Friday. According to Hadebe, this is only the beginning, he said, of action that will see land invasions occur across the country on unused, as he puts it, or underdeveloped land, no matter where the ownership lies. End of quotation. Now again, this is typecast and typical EFF, who have no respect for life, liberty, and especially property rights, who have no respect for South Africa and the institutions of this country. I've said this once and I'll say it again. The EFF hate South Africa and South Africans. The campaign they're waging right now of misleading mostly poor people into thinking that they are redistributing land, which simply does not belong to them, will only hurt those poor people in the long run, when law enforcement then has to respond in order to remove them from their illegal occupation. But do you think the EFF care? Of course not, because for them, this is about simply acquiring votes off of misleading people, which is exactly what their politicians and their political elites are all about. They are liars in the extreme, which is, again, I hate to say it, typecast of leftist politicians in particular, indeed all politicians, if I'm to be honest. As I always say, hashtag politicians are trash. And indeed, if you look at the developments on this issue, that's exactly what played out. Of course, law enforcement did respond to this illegal land invasion. I'm just going to put those photos on the screen so you can see exactly a large contingent of police vehicles had initially responded to the land invasion, and for some reason or other, which is yet to be determined, were said to have turned back. So one has to ask the question as to what the local municipality in that area is planning in order to protect the property rights in that area. Now, my final take on this particular issue is exposing to an extent how the corporate media simply never report at times on issues accurately. Now, corporate media so far, now that they actually are beginning to cover this issue, have covered it as a quote-unquote service delivery protest. Watch this.
You would know that I find myself here in Olivenhout-Bosch this morning, and this is a protest being led by the EFF. And of course, this is also under the cloud of the issues being raised around the Tshwane Mayor, Randall Williams, and of course, the issues of service delivery to the people of this municipality, especially taking a key focus with those townships in these municipalities. But Ayanda, as you can see behind us, just here, you can see that, this R55 road in Olivenhout-Bosch has been completely shut off. Of course, we've been here from around 5 o'clock this morning, and I can tell you that, Ayanda, that a number of residents have battled to even make their way outside of their neighborhood. And of course, some residents here quite angry when it comes to issues of service delivery.
Right, you heard that journalist, of course, that clip courtesy of Newsroom Africa. That is not a service delivery protest. That is a political formation, the third largest political party in this country, embarking on illegal, on the one hand, land invasions, and on the second hand, using this protest as cover for their illegal actions. This is not insofar as the appearance of it all, it is not a service delivery protest. It has nothing likely to do with the grievances said that they claim against the Tshwane mayor. This is simply the EFF playing politics. And the bottom line is this: law enforcement must respond, because that response is not only to save and protect the property rights of those individuals who may very well be the rightful owners of that land, but also to protect the poor people who are being misled by the EFF, who are actually building potentially homes, shacks on land which is unsafe for human habitation. I mean, some of the images I've been flighting have these people building, for example, under high voltage power lines. That is simply irresponsible and dangerous. And this practice of the EFF of invading land in order to build shacks is absolutely bullcrap. And it takes all of us South Africans, wherever you lie on the political spectrum, to actually call the EFF out and say enough with your leftist nonsense. All right, now I take you to Cape Town in our last story for the morning, where we go to Parliament, where you'll remember that building burnt down, allegedly. The culprit, the arsonist, a 1 billy goat gruff, just kidding, Dlamini-Zuma, who was accused, of course, of burning Parliament down, facing a raft of charges, including arson and even terrorism, a Schedule 6 offence. Dlamini-Zuma, just to give you the latest on him, of course, still languishes in jail, having been denied bail. Now, Parliament, 8 months after it began the process of tallying the costs and assessing the damage, coming out with a report basically pointing out 2 things. Number one, it'll cost 2 billion rand. That's 2 billion rands to repair Parliament. And not only those 2 billion rands, but it'll take 3 years to fix this particular building. Now, these are big numbers, and of course, Parliament is scratching its head, wondering where it is going to get the money. The new secretary, that's the new boss of Parliament, a Xolile George, is quoted in an EWN piece as basically lamenting this issue as following. Parliament has been mulling over a temporary modular structure for its sittings in the interim. That is, of course, what it'll do in the meantime. But this will cost over 600,000 rands and could take up to 2 years to be built. Quoting George, that's Xolile George, he said, "We have made our own quantification, of what needs to be done to prepare for the State of the Nation address, as well as the sittings around the medium-term budget policy statement." That's according to George, of course. For now, Parliament said it's talking to the City of Cape Town to lease the City Hall for big events until further decisions are made. End of quote. Now, again, this whole situation is just a toxic brew of multiple moving parts. From the one hand, of course, the still for me lack of real concrete answers around how this incident happened and who is behind it, even though we have, as I said, Dlamini-Zuma, aka Billy Goat Gruff, because he is the scapegoat seemingly on this issue, facing a raft of charges. It still leaves many questions as to, is he really the culprit behind this? Is a homeless man, as the story is being told to us, who entered the parliamentary precinct and began to set fire to it, really could have created all that damage? Why aren't any officials of Parliament being held responsible? For instance, why the water system, that's the emergency fire water sprinkler system, didn't respond to the smoke and, of course, the flames in order to extinguish them and reduce the damage? Will there be any heads that roll from Parliament? These and more questions are yet to be answered, and we'll, of course, keep an eye on this issue. All right, folks, that's it for the Tuesday edition of Vuka Nazo, your morning news analysis show. Make sure, of course, you find us on my website. That's at www.bigdaddyliberty.com. There, you'll also be able to find out how you can support the show financially. People are making contributions from 100 Rand to 150 Rand per month, and it really does help me put together the show and, of course, hire the folks who help me do all the editing work. So please consider subscribing and supporting the Big Daddy Liberty show. With that being said, if you're watching this simulcast on either Facebook or YouTube, especially on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and, of course, the bell notification so that every weekday from 7 a.m. you're notified when Vuka Nazo is on your screens. Have a great morning. See you tomorrow.